Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Namo Namaha, Jai Ganesha. Please visit our website at classicalyoga.org and thank you for your support. Don't be a half Hindu at best. Don't be an inno in anything, an in-name only person. Certainly in this context, don't be a Hindu. Don't be a Hindu in name only. If one declares they are of any of the religions of the world, does it not make sense to be established in that religion, stand up for that religion, recognize what it is, what the many beliefs are? But today we have a very strange occurrence when it comes to the Hindu yoga dharma, the Hindu religion, Hinduism. Because of a lack of clarity and a lack of courage on the part of many Hindus, so many are so confused about exactly what is Hinduism, and especially when it comes to what are inseparable practices of yoga within Hinduism. Basically, succinctly, the Hindu yoga dharma is all about the many teachings and practices of yoga. Karma yoga, Hindu ethics and selfless service, bhakti yoga, Hindu devotions, Raja yoga, Hindu contemplations, Gyan yoga, Hindu studies outwardly and inward realizations, Hatha yoga, Hindu devotional postures, mantra yoga, Hindu chants, japa yoga, Hindu chants on beads, nada yoga, Hindu devotional music, nata yoga, Hindu divine dance, and living this Hindu yoga religious, spiritual, scientific lifestyle stimulates the inner awakening or the inner forces which we call Kundalini yoga. Now, all one has to do is the least bit of research to realize that all of these words that we use are Sanskrit, and we have to give obeisance to the Tamil language also and the many other languages of India. But Sanskrit is, by definition, the ancient noble Arya, another misunderstood word, language of the Hindus. It's a religious language, perfectly constructed, Sanskritam. So all of these words that are bandied about today, yoga, guru, chakras, mantra, Ayurveda, these are all about the Hindu religion, if one is honest. Yet why do so many eschew the word Hindu? We have all kinds of teachers today of these various aspects of what actually is Hinduism, and they are not Hindus, and they avoid the word Hindu, and certainly the word religion. So obviously this would demand a tremendous commitment on the part of anyone who attempted to teach any of these various aspects of what actually is Hinduism. And many have a perhaps distorted view or perhaps a very real view of Hinduism that they just do not like. They do not feel comfortable with. Well, if that's the case, well, then why even get involved at all or be courageous and seek to reform? However, ironically, paradoxically, bizarrely, you name it, we have many quote-unquote Hindus, and some of them don't even want to use the word Hindu, which is really confusing, opting for words like Vedanta or Sanatana Dharma. Is it any wonder that there is a stigma against the word Hindu when even the quote-unquote Hindus don't want to use the word? However, even among those who do use the word, they're not quite sure that Hinduism is a specific religion. They're coming from a very confused mindset of perhaps this is universal, or perhaps this is not all that serious, so people can take from Hinduism and do whatever they want with it. And even more bizarrely, some will say, like the Hindu American Foundation, that basically people can partake of what is actually Hinduism, and though they're not Hindus, and all they have to do is say that this is all about Hinduism, but they don't have to be Hindus to be teachers. What a bizarre, confusing message this sends. Can you imagine someone teaching a class in the Bible and holding classes in baptism and communion, and then saying, well, I'm not a Christian, and I'm just taking these things from Christianity, and that's okay because I recognize it comes from Christianity, but I'm teaching it in another context. It's just so mind-bogglingly illogical. In this age of instant communication, all one has to do, for example, is say, hey, Google, is Sanskrit Hindu?
According to Wikipedia, Sanskrit is the sacred language of Hinduism, the language of classical Hindu philosophy, and of historical texts of Buddhism and Jainism.
Okay. Now, how about, hey, Google, define yoga?
Here's the definition of yoga, a Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline, a part of which, including breath control, simple meditation, and the adoption of specific bodily postures, is widely practiced for health and relaxation.
So there you go. Sanskrit is the religious language of Hinduism, and yoga is, by definition, a Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline. In fact, we find the word yoga right from the Rig Veda, yoge samana parivam sapta shravato rato gat. Through the practices of yoga, one finds within their body their beautiful, tranquil nature, and the 7 flowing rivers, which refer to the 7 chakras. It's so easy to discern that it's within Hinduism that one finds all of the aspects of yoga. And is it not interesting that when one makes the cliche that yoga fits into anybody's religion, that the word yoga is not mentioned even once in the Torah, the Christian Bible, or the Quran? Now, contrast this when actually there's a recent definition that's been put up that wasn't there before when one asked if yoga is Hindu. And so listen to this one. Hey, Google, is yoga Hindu?
According to Hindu American Foundation, yoga is a spiritual discipline rooted in Hindu philosophy and is universally available to anyone without any coercion, pressure, or requirement to change one's religion.
So, according to the HAF organization, Hindu American Foundation, they recognize that yoga is a spiritual discipline. Actually, it's a religious discipline. Remember, the word spiritual means incorporeal. So no body is really spiritual. These are religious disciplines, and they do say rooted in Hindu philosophy. So now, what happens when one takes something from its roots? Does it not die? So essentially, yoga is Hinduism. But then, in a very bizarre way, there seem to be capitulating, or are capitulating, by simply saying it's universally available to anyone. Okay, yes, anyone is free to study any of the religions of the world, including Hinduism. But you see, with this vague statement, it gives license for anyone to automatically become a teacher. And then, in a sense of apologizing, it seems, for Hinduism, it's universally available to anyone without any coercion, pressure, or requirement to change one's religion. So, is it so bad to be a Hindu? Is there something wrong with one who wants to convert or adopt to Hinduism? Now, over a decade ago, this Hindu American Foundation instituted a Take Back Yoga campaign, something that obviously has failed. Of course, they have to define taking back to what? If they're taking it back to the understanding that yoga is Hinduism, well, and taught by Hindus, it's totally failed. But again, in a totally mixed message, the HAF organization quotes from Pratipi Joyce from the Ashtanga Yoga group and Desikachar. And these are individuals who completely divorced Ashtanga Yoga from Hinduism and from its original source in the Yoga Sutras, because they're actually redefining Ashtanga Yoga to suit their agenda. In true Ashtanga Yoga, there's absolutely no mention of any specific Hatha Yoga asana at all, and today's Ashtanga Yoga is merely about the asanas. Of course, they pretend to teach the yamas and niyamas, but they also are so redefined to suit a modern agenda, which is a total insult to the original text and to the Saiva Hindu guru Patanjali. All one has to do is go to YouTube, and you'll be busy for years listening to all of the misinformation about what is Ashtanga Yoga taught by non-Hindus, even some Indians who would also call themselves Hindus. They're simply redefining what the original author wrote to suit their modern agenda. So this modern yoga is just another way of saying a totally distorted yoga. And it's actually no different than what the Christians did to the Jews. Did they not steal everything from the Jews and create their own cultic organization with disastrous results, certainly for the Jews and many others, along with obviously doing some good, which is the selling point? Sadly, yoga today, despite HAF's HAF measures to take back yoga, this yoga has been completely divorced from Hinduism. Anyone who takes an honest look at today's yoga has to admit that. The yoga studios, the so-called yoga teachers who take these simplistic 200-hour certifications, which is the governing body for so-called yoga, when it actually takes decades and decades of committed study to be a real yogi and a teacher of the Hindu yoga disciplines. This yoga of today is taught by non-Hindus. It's not taught in a Hindu context. You'll hardly ever hear the word Hindu in any class, and that's because the teachers are not Hindus. But what's even more bizarre is today many are saying, oh, well, it's okay as long as we recognize that yoga is Hinduism. But how much logic does that make? We're teaching something that we recognize as Hinduism, but we're not Hindus, and we don't even mention the word Hindu. So we have now so-called yoga in the public schools. But talk about slapping Hindus in the face, and they just willingly seem to accept it. This yoga that's in the schools can be taught, but that's it. No other Sanskrit terms, no namaste, no oming, no reference to religion, no reference to Hinduism. Are Hindus that naive that they don't see that they're being totally disrespected while they're stealing something from an established religious tradition, but you can't mention the religion? Now, they had a recent case in Alabama where, rightly, Alabama banned the practice of yoga in the schools for 20 years. And it's recently overturned, but again, they're not allowed to use any Sanskrit, no mention of religion or Hinduism. Talk about keeping people in the closet. And this ruling was predicated by, back in, I think, in the 90s, in Encinitas, California, there was a big brouhaha over yoga in the schools, which is actually trying to be introduced by one of these Ashtanga yoga groups. And the final conclusion was, yeah, it's okay to have yoga in the public schools, but you can't have any reference to Hinduism or religion at all. And HAF was asked to comment about this, and what a mind-boggling response from them. I'll read you some of what they said. Yoga is a spiritual discipline rooted in Hindu philosophy. Again, yoga is a Hindu religious spiritual discipline and is universally available to anyone without coercion, etc., 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 right? But then they talk about asana or postural practice has been shown to tremendously benefit muscle tone, flexibility, blood pressure, back pain, arthritis, and the immune system, etc., etc. They go on to say that under the First Amendment, public schools may offer yoga-based programs such as asana-only programs as part of their curriculum, because asana alone is not yoga. What? Hatha yoga is asana. And by the way, of all the classic Hindu yogas, This was the only one that the Rishi said, don't display it. Keep it secret. All you have to do is go to the original text, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Geranda Samhita, Siva Samhita, the Siddhasiddhanta Padati of Yogi Garakanath, and they all said the same thing. Hatha Vidya, Bhaveda Yavate Guya Niveda Tu Prakashavaranam. This knowledge, Vidya of Hatha, is powerful Bhaveda when you keep it secret, Guya, and loses power, Niveda, when you display it, Prakashavaranam. It's not that Hatha Yoga can't be taught, but because it does deal with the physical body, the rishis full well knew that people would abuse this, and exactly what's happened. And it's because of this complacency on the part of many Hinnos and the HAF organization, being half Hindus at best, that we have all of this nonsense that has to be addressed. Hot yoga, power yoga, beer yoga, doggy yoga, laughter yoga, nude yoga, goat yoga, beer yoga, Ted's yoga, Mary's yoga, Kino's yoga, Emily's yoga. We'll get to that one in a minute. But even fundamentalists in the other religions of the world, they're not brash enough to put their name on the specific practices of their religion. There's no Jimmy Swaggart baptism, huh? They have their own organizations and their .coms. But now we have Emily's yoga, Kino's yoga. And again, these people seem to be interested in the Hindu yoga dharma, but it's very clear by their very name that they never fully became Hindus. And do they mention that what they're teaching is Hinduism? When one becomes a member of any of the great religions of the world, they very typically take on a name that reflects that. So therefore you don't see somebody named Shiva Patel that is a Christian. They change their name. No, they become James or Mary Patel. So too in Hinduism. We find it in the Vedas. Dadhana Namayajniyam. They took on sacrificial, sacred names. Even in the Hindu Yoga Dharma. When we are born with a Sanskrit Hindu name or Tamil name, for example, one may have that changed when they become a Swami. But it's never a Christian name. It's never a Muslim name. It's never a Jewish name. For example, the great Narendra Nath Dutt became the great Swami Vivekananda. Now we have a lot of Westerners, non-Indians, who apparently love the Hindu Yoga Dharma, Hinduism, the Hindu religion. Very scholarly. Their scholarship is to be really lauded, very praiseworthy. But they really never became full Hindus. They're keeping their Judeo-Christian names. We have like David Frawley. We have Edwin Bryant. We have James Mallison. Jeffrey Long. Jeffrey Armstrong, to name a few. And you know, in life we cannot have two legal names. So many of them will say AKA, Kavindra Rishi, etc. But this has got to be a nickname. So how serious is the dharma to them if they're just using a Sanskrit Hindu name as a nickname? So when Hindus, half Hindus, on the one hand say that yoga is Hindu, but on the other hand say, well, as long as you recognize that it's Hindu, you can basically do anything you want with it. You can teach it. You can be a yoga teacher, and you don't have to be a Hindu. What incredible illogic this is, and such a mixed message. Now, the Hindu American Foundation claims on their website to be promoting sadbhavana, or cooperation, and vivek, or wise wisdom, discrimination. Is this discrimination? Is this wise? To on the one hand say yoga is Hindu, but on the other hand say, well, but you don't have to teach it as Hinduism, or you don't have to be a Hindu. Would this fly in any of the other religions of the world? Do you ever go to a church, to a synagogue, to a mosque, And do you even ask the question if the person up there teaching is a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, respectively? It should go without saying that anyone who teaches any aspect of yoga, which we know is Hinduism, and even HAF admits it's Hinduism, should go without saying that they are at the very least a Hindu. Now, this is also a problem because in the past many said that one could not convert or adopt to Hinduism. This is really a fallacy. Even Swami Vivekananda said whole nations have been converted into Hinduism. Who's to say what one can become or not in this world? If one decides that they want to become a Hindu, it's perfectly available to anyone. Hinduism is a religion. Remember, India is a country, Indian is an ethnicity. And yes, thousands and thousands of years ago, all Hindus were Indians from India, but the world is a cosmopolitan world today. People have moved all over the world. So we have three distinct categories sometimes: India, Indian, and Hindu. Hindu is the religion to which anyone can ethically convert or adopt. Conversion means you were already initiated in one religion, and you have to ethically leave that religion and then formally become a member of the next religion. Adoption means one really had no previous religion, and then they still have to go through the rigorous study and then formal commitment. And part of a commitment to becoming a Hindu is your namakarana samskara, when you receive your name-giving sacrament. So when it comes to the Sadbhavana, touted by the HAF Organization of Cooperation, we've been trying to reach out to them for decades, with basically no response at all. The only time they ever will contact our organization is when they want something, or they want us to sign a petition. Other than that, though many personal notes have been sent to the trustees, absolutely no response whatsoever. So the bottom line is basically there are two types of yoga today. Adya asti dvi yogas asi, Sat, Asat. Sat yoga Hindu dharma asi, Hindu acharyas dakshina. Meaning that basically there are two yogas, real and unreal, or real and phony, if you will. That shocks a lot of people, but truly it is. So factually, what is real yoga? Obviously, Sanskrit, which is the religious language of Hinduism. And remember that the Sanskrit Hindu word yoga means yuj atman brahman cha, to yoke to your atmana and brahman. And this is not taught in your average Christian church. And then all of the prefixes are very important to denote how Hindus are seeking this atma darshana, realizing their soul, if you will. Yuj atman brahman cha. That's why we do karma yoga, bhakti yoga, Raja Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Japa Yoga, Nada Yoga, Natha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga. Obviously, that's Hinduism. It's not Judaism. It's not Islam. It's not Christianity. So there are two types of yoga. We have real yoga, which is factually all about the Hindu religion, Hindu dharma, and true to any of the religions of the world, taught by, in this case, Hindus. To anyone who wants to learn, I mean, we're open for that. We don't put stipulations on who can learn as long as they're respectful. However, there's a huge difference between a student and a teacher. That should be common sense. The teachers of any of the world's religions are, at the very least, qualified members of those religions. So real yoga is all about the Hindu religion, taught by Hindus, and not for a fee. Again, true to all the religious traditions of the world. Nobody charges you to go into a temple, a synagogue, a mosque. It's free. That's the beauty of it. Nobody can buy and sell the spirit. Of course, today's yoga is so commercialized. It's all about how to increase your yoga business. Totally distorted, totally perverted. And again, this is all the outcome of weak HAF Hindus who never really understood the Dharma and or were not willing to stand up for it. So today, however, what do we have? Quite the opposite. We have this so-called yoga that is not taught in a Hindu context. You'll never hear the word Hindu. It's not taught by Hindus, and it's basically a business. So, adyasti dvi yogas asi, sat asat cha. So we have two yogas. Which one do we want to follow? Real or phony or unreal? That's why we say, as the rishis said thousands of years ago, Asato ma sadgamaya, lead me from untruth to truth. There was untruth then as there is today. So in this phony or spurious yoga, we have several types. We have those who simply use the word yoga and then that's it. Everything else is just pure exercise. And this is what we see in the public schools, for example. And this is kind of like saying, okay, we're going to have a baptism class and it's all about underwater therapy and that's it. Now there's a second group, and this is very prolific, of those who use the Sanskrit Hindu word yoga and many other terms, namaste, jyoti, shakti, shanti. They'll start using the specific Sanskrit terms for the asanas, matsyendrasana, for example. And yet, even with all of that, many will not recognize that this is Hinduism. They'll say it's something universal, which is, again, part of the problem. Many quote-unquote Hindus have been duped into thinking that Hinduism, which they'll generally refer to as Sanatana Dharma, is the universal way and everything is merely a reflection of it. That's simply a fundamentalist. It's the same thing that a Christian would say, for example, that Catholicism is universal, Jesus is for everybody. So look, they've just simply replaced it and now say yoga's for everybody. It's the same fundamentalist mindset. Remember, the Hindu yoga dharma is a way. Maybe the way for you and maybe the best way for you. But it is not the way, and it's certainly not no way or a universal way. So we have this second type who use many, many Sanskrit Hindu terms. And some are now saying, well, yeah, as long as we give credence to the fact that this is Hinduism, it's okay to do. But how much sense does that make? So you're teaching something that is Hindu, but you're not a Hindu, and you don't even mention the word Hindu in your class. It's totally illogical. But then there's another type. There's actually a religious type of yoga, but it's not Hindu. You have Christian yoga, for example. And these people, you can clearly see the fundamentalism, because they'll often say, well, you know, everything belongs to God anyway, so we can take whatever we want. And this is another sore point. When Hindus misuse the Christian term God, trying so desperately to fit in, for example, and saying, oh, we believe in one God too. This is monotheism. This is Christianity. This is Islam. This is Judaism. And even Orthodox Jews and Muslims don't use the word God. They use their respective terms. Yahweh, Allah. But when it comes to Hindus, they're bending over backwards so far to capitulate, right, that they've actually lost their own identity. So this so-called universalism that many Hindus ascribe to is not pluralism at all. It really boils down to an absurdism. Speaking of absurd, here's a conversation I've been having with a lady who has developed her own brand of yoga, Emily Rowell Yoga. Numerous YouTube videos. And according to her, she says, quote, the reason I make videos talking about yoga is because I am saddened and frustrated by the way yoga is portrayed in the West. As you know, Western yoga heavily focuses on the physical aspect, and unfortunately the philosophy and deeper teachings of yoga are often overlooked. So, on the one hand, this Emily seems very saddened over the way yoga is portrayed, but is she really? She goes on to say, I recognize and acknowledge that yoga originates with the Hindu religion. Shouldn't that be enough said? If yoga originates with the Hindu religion, it is the Hindu religion, or is it now not the Hindu religion? Though it originally was Hindu, is it now something else? She goes on to say, however, of course, yoga has now moved around the world and is being embraced by various other religions and cultures. Really? What other religions are embracing Hinduism? They may be embracing what they think is yoga, but are they embracing Hinduism? I don't think so. The only way that so-called yoga can be embraced by other religions and even in the public venues, is by completely stripping it of its Hindu identity. When are many, and certainly Hindus, going to wake up to this reality? Actually, Hindus in name only, like the HAF organization seems to be, are actually the problem, because she goes on to say every single other Hindu I have communicated with has agreed that yoga is open to everyone. Again, Jesus is for everyone, yoga is for everyone. However, it goes on to say open to everyone as long as the roots of the practice are respected and honored. But are they? Are the roots respected and honored of Hinduism if one is not claiming that what they're teaching is Hindu? And how can anybody be teaching specifically Hindu practices if they're not a Hindu? It's one thing to be a teacher of comparative religions. That's another story. But when one is teaching specifically Christian practices, would it not make sense that the person's a Christian? When one is teaching specific Hindu recognized practices, does it not make sense that they would, at the very least, be a Hindu? So for all those into today's so-called yoga, if you're not honest enough to admit that yoga is all about the Hindu religion, why not just get out of it? And of course, most all of you are just doing the postures, so why not have classes in stretching and relaxation if that's what you're doing? Because that is what you're doing. If you do not recognize that yoga is all about Hinduism, you are doing simple stretching and relaxation. Why not just do that? You could even include the word meditation, because that's an English word. But when it comes to true Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, etc., this is Hinduism. Now, if you'd like to learn true yoga, true Hinduism, why not do that? Study the Hindu yoga religion. Take a step back. Stop teaching so-called yoga. Learn, and then become a Hindu, and then maybe teach down the road. But, of course, that would take a lot of commitment. That would take a lot of swallowing of one's pride, a lot of admission that one was guilty of basically a religious theft, religious appropriation. It's not merely cultural appropriation, it's religious appropriation. You lose your students, you lose your finances. And a lot of people are not willing to go this extra length, right? Not willing to swallow their pride that they've actually done something wrong. If one wants to make money, we'll get a job, but don't take religious spiritual disciplines and create a business out of them. Religions are vocations. There is a business end to it, of course, but again, all religious profound teachings are offered on a donation basis. This puts the onus totally on the devotee to give. And now when it comes to the Hindus, this is where you have to educate yourself and find some courage to stand up for the Hindu yoga dharma. Be willing to say, yes, all of yoga is about the Hindu dharma, Hinduism, the Hindu religion. If people would like to learn, fine. But before they ever attempt to teach, they must first and foremost become Hindus. And certainly not a half Hindu. It's way past time, Hindus. I mean, the historical invasions, theft into India, into the Hindu yoga dharma is well documented, and it still continues to go on because of many Hindus who simply want to capitulate to others and feign a kind of pluralism that is really not indicative of a rational mind, a logical mind, a compassionate mind. No one should ever be covertly led into any religion, and that's exactly what is being done when people do not recognize that what they're teaching, especially to children, is all about the Hindu religion. They are being covertly led. At some point, they're going to do their own study and say, wait a minute, Mommy, Daddy. I did a little research. All I did was ask Google. about yoga, and I found out, wait a minute, this is Hinduism. You've been indoctrinating me or allowing me to be indoctrinated into another religion. Why did you do this? So let's put on our compassionate thinking caps here and truly respect individuals. Respect the various religious traditions of the world. And stop being an in-name only person. Don't go halfway with anything. Commit and stick. Jai Ganesha, Jai Hindu Yoga, religious, spiritual, scientific lifestyle. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.